challenge a man or a masculine being from a place of closed-heartedness, what you will get is defense, almost inevitably. Challenge a man from an open-hearted place, like where he or she, they can feel your heart fully engaged in the challenge, and you'll get an elevated response.
You're a man who has certainly made friends with death. And I'm just curious if you could say a few words about that as a practice, that as a way of snapping ourselves out of our shallow living.
Yeah. One of the things I love to do, one of my favorite practices, is to actually go out in nature and like spread my awareness around to feel everything that's dying, from the trees to the animals to the, to literally, like, we avoid death because, it's an ending, right? And it's scary for us to look at. But one of the most relaxing practices that I use consistently is to literally feel everything that's dying, feel the way that death is everywhere, and we don't. And as a nervous system, especially for those, what I've seen with when I do this practice with people is how it calms their nervous system to just feel like, oh, there's an end, that is just, death is very much a part of life, and it is peaceful, and it is nothingness, and who the fuck knows, maybe it's hellish. Who knows what's on the other side? I think it's probably not, but just meditating on death itself is a really powerful practice. And then, of course, asking yourself the question, what do I need to do before I die so that I can die complete? Is a great way. I mean, even Stephen Covey had some version of this, and this is a very important masculine practice. But to really feel like, if I was going to go in the next, let's say I had 10, 15, 20 years, however many years we have left, 30 years, um, what would I want to do, be, change, so that when I die, I could die complete, and then orienting your life to that, literally, because that is the thing that matters most. So on your deathbed, you can reevaluate and be like, did I give it all? Did I love? Did I try to change my karma? Did I give to the world the way that I was called to give to the world? So that at the very end, there's a sense of completion, of
Mm.
no regret. And most people aren't living that way. Most people aren't thinking about that. They're tending to think towards, and again, this is to the crazy wisdom practice, to really let death inform how you're living today, is a beautiful, challenging discipline.
Truly. Yeah. I mean, I think there's no greater motivator to live a life of purpose than embracing our own mortality. I mean,
Mm,
it will absolutely add fuel to any vision we might have. And I think it's very easy to, in this culture in particular, to be kind of removed from death and disconnected from it, and to let it. We don't have elders in our lives in the way that we used to. We don't have. There's a separation where it's easy to just to rest in comfort rather than feeling the inevitable and using that as fuel.
yeah. Well, the other piece that I think is really beautiful comes out of the Toltec shamanist tradition of Carlos Castaneda, which is, if every act is connected to the possibility that it could be your last act before you die, how would you do that? So if you were making love with your partner, and you were treating it as if it was the last act before you died, how much more heart, power, depth, appreciation, devotion, worship are you going to bring to that, right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
next time you play with your children, or the next time you write something for a book, or the next podcast. If this was the very last podcast we were going to do, if we thought death is coming, man, we'd probably, go as deep as we could, in
Yeah.
this. And so it's a death is a beautiful training, experience, and one that I hope more and more people, latch onto.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Well, let's go as deep as we possibly can.
Yeah, just in case, man, meteor might be coming.
You have a new book, your first
Hmm.
book, yes? Is this your first
It's
book?
my first book. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really remarkable contribution to men's work, and just written mostly for men or masculine identified people who are focused on leadership, leading in love, leading in life, and
Mm, mm.
just chock full of practices. And so, congratulations on the new book.
Thank
It's
you.
really
Thank
wonderful.
you. Thank you.
It's called From the Core.
Which I want to connect to the practice we started with, right? People are like, why did you name it From the Core? And I'm like, because there is this capacity of breathing into your pelvic floor. It's the deepest part of your body. And if that's where you move from, live from, access consciousness from, step forward from, make love from, like if that's where you are living from, it's going to be a much deeper experience for you and others. So just to connect those two concepts, I think is important.
This book is I've already given this out to several clients who I coach, men, and I think it's a wonderful framing around like masculine leadership. One of the primary kind of concepts here in your book is like the masculine grows through challenge, right? And the challenge of other men, the challenge of the feminine, that a masculine identified being or human will kind of rise to the occasion when confronted or challenged from a place of open heartedness. And I'm wondering if you could just say a bit more about
Right,
like,
right.
this concept that as men being challenged may be, while uncomfortable, may be the path towards the greatest expression of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a huge caveat to that, right?
Hmm.
Challenge a man or a masculine being from a place of closed heartedness, what you will get is defense,
Hmm.
almost inevitably. Challenge a man from an open hearted place, like where he or she, they can feel your heart fully engaged in the challenge, and you'll get an elevated response. And it's really important for people who, yes, the masculine does grow by challenge, but he does not grow by attack per se. um, and so it's really important for those, because so many women have read my book and are giving it to their men and da da da. And it's just important to say that, like, the open-hearted point that you made is so crucial, which is why in men's work, right, first thing is you have men feel each other's hearts, and then you have men give each other feedback and challenge each other. And once that bond has been established, where I can feel your heart, you can feel my heart, we can say almost anything to each other, right? I mean, you and I have been in circle together where that's happened. And so the masculine is craving, men in particular, I think, are craving open-hearted depth,
Hmm.
open-hearted challenge, open-hearted, you can do better than that, brother. Open-hearted, you need to fucking look at your shadow here, brother. Open-hearted, you need to be more sensitive, brother. I mean, all those things, I think men are not just, they don't just grow, but they're so malnourished in that area where they don't get that. It's almost like they don't even know that they're missing something like a crucial nutrient in their life, in their world.
Absolutely. Well, if we take this concept kind of again in this show,
Hmm.
we go to the extremes. I,
Yeah.
I want to paint a picture of a scene. I'm in a men's retreat with you that you're leading, and there's a group of about 30 men in a circle,
Mm-hmm.
and each man takes his turn to step into the center, and he walks around the circle as men are just pointing out what they perceive in the way that he is showing up in a kind of an inauthentic or in a projected manner
Or habitual.
or habitual, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as they're walking around the circle, men are throwing phrases and masks and descriptors of how this man appears to be habitually moving, talking.
Hmm.
And my God, is this a fucking cutting practice to be unmasked in such an intense way? And so we end up with phrases, and this is, I believe you call this the persona practice,
Yeah.
right?
Persona work. Yeah.
So I will share mine reluctly, but the one that I came out with that these men kind of bestowed upon me was seductive emu. It just cuts to the heart of how when I'm not necessarily at my best self or just in a way of my habitual patterns, how I show up with kind of a puffed chest and kind of hook people into my, I don't know, sometimes it's seductive, sometimes it's just straight charming, right? How I use
Right.
my charm as a way to just a subtle distance and a little bit of control the people around me. And what a painfully glorious way to be seen and to be challenged by a group
Yeah.
of men.
Yeah. Yeah. Painfully glorious. Yeah. Well, first of all, I learned that practice from Teo Alfaro, who comes out of the the Toltec shamanist tradition that we talked about,
Right.
and I've adjusted it for the men's work that I do, but I think that that is a perfect example of it's both, like you said, painful and glorious to be seen and to be unmasked, stripped, right?
Hmm.
So some guys are in that circle for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you know what I mean? 15 minutes but to be stripped of all of the armor that you bring to the world by a group of men, with humor and love. I mean, it really it's a serious practice, man.
Would you mind sharing your persona name?
Yeah, yeah. My persona name is Bleeding Valentine, and it was very much given to me by by what a men's group I was in for 8 years, and really, yeah, really hits how I use my heart to both, and personas are a gift, right? Like your seductive emu is a gift in a certain way, right? He's like a Pied Piper and he's very trustable and playful and warm. And Bleeding Valentine is both the way that I use my heart to heal and feel, but also the way I use my heart to manipulate, defend, all the things, all the shadow things. So the whole idea of persona work is that you can't escape your persona. It's not something to overcome. It's just something to get conscious of. And so that process of discovering a persona name is so brutal, so that all of a sudden, like out of the ethers, the name just pops up after this 20, 30 minutes. It's a very and I know you chose that practice because it is such a quintessential crazy wisdom
Hmm.
idea to
Right.
step into a circle like that.
Are there any other kind of persona names that, without obviously naming real names, that you find particularly
Oh
poignant or
man,
descriptive?
we've had some beautiful ones. We've had like armored lederhosen. We've had we've had yeah, we've had manicured Mirage. We've had Hollywood Jesus. We've had Catwalk Garbo. A good friend of mine, Rich, is named Catwalk Garbo. I think he shared that a few times.
Yeah.
And what these do is they really do unmask and unearth the thing that the world has sees in you, but that no one's actually had the balls to call you out on. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that practice up. That's such an interesting one to stick into this conversation.
Right. Maybe the most kind of cutting one I heard was friend request. Right.
Friend request. Oh yeah.
Yes.
It took him about 6 months to like really get that one. But this is the thing. He gets it now. And now he's able to bring that awareness, like, oh, where am I being friend request here? There was a new one. There was one that came out. I just did a batch of these a couple months ago. Dial tone was one. Don't call me mall cop was another. They come out of nowhere and they're so beautifully humorous and brutal that it just, yeah,
Yeah.
I love this practice.
Mommy's Little Messiah, I believe
Yeah,
is one.
that's a good
Oh,
one. Yeah. Yeah.
that actually is the essence of this practice, I think. These are ways to kind of pop the ego structure. We can kind of digest and expand around these habitual patterns where we may have closure.